This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The UN condemns the Burkina Faso attack as ISIL's leader appears in a video calling for more attacks in Africa. Where does this leave the continent's anti-terror efforts? Sudan's army rulers and protest leaders differ on a joint council. And 38 killed as floods worsen in Mozambique after a second cyclone. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation to export natural gas to Europe as refinery closures favor Nigeria. And in sports, Senegal hosts the second edition of the Sanduro Yamaha motocross race. In our top story, the weekend's religious attack in Burkina Faso has received international condemnation. Members of the UN Security Council called for global action to stem all forms of hate crimes as they marked a minute of silence to honor the victims. On Sunday, gunmen opened fire at congregants just as they were leaving a Protestant church in northern Burkina Faso. At least 6 people, including a pastor, were killed. This is Burkina Faso's first attack on a church since jihadist violence erupted in 2016. It follows another attack on Friday where jihadists killed 6 people at a village school located in the country's eastern region.
I should like to express on behalf of the members of the Council our condemnation of yesterday's attack on the Protestant church in Silgadji, Burkina Faso, as well as the shooting that occurred at the Chabad of Poway synagogue in San Diego in the US on Saturday. May I ask that all those present in the chamber now stand and join me in observing a minute of silence in solemn commemoration of those who lost their lives in these attacks at their places of worship.
Meanwhile, the leader of terrorist group ISIL, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, says the Easter Sunday bombings in Sri Lanka were his organization's revenge for losses in its last territorial stronghold of Baghouz in Syria. Baghdadi made his first purported appearance in 5 years in a propaganda video whose authenticity could not be independently verified. He also congratulated militant groups in Burkina Faso and Mali for pledging allegiance to ISIL, urging them to intensify attacks. His sentiments have confirmed fears of ISIL's growing presence in Africa. The group is competing for dominance and followers in the region. It thrives in countries afflicted by civil unrest, poor governance and religious tensions, challenges faced by many African nations. So far, some factions of militant groups in Africa, like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab, have pledged allegiance to ISIL. The group is also active in Tunisia, Libya and Egypt. Well, let's discuss this a little further. We're joined by CGTN's Deji Badmos in Lagos. Deji, we know, of course, that, we're just looking back to elections earlier this year in Nigeria. In the lead up to the poll, Boko Haram had already pledged allegiance to ISIS and claimed responsibility for a deadly attack on a motorcade carrying a Borno state governor. Just thinking of that particular incident and, of course, many others, how much of a threat would you say the group poses today?
Well, Lindy, Boko Haram still poses very serious threat. Just yesterday, or on the 26th of April, I should say, Boko Haram actually overran a military forward base in Borno State. We understand 5 soldiers were killed, and they carted away military weapons, high caliber weapons. That's what we've been told. Now that report is just coming out, and I mean it's a glaring signal now that Boko Haram is still a potent force. And when you also consider the fact that the group is now split, you have the other faction that has pledged allegiance. Of course, both factions actually pledge allegiance to ISIS, but there's this other faction known as ISWAP that has actually been gaining ground for quite a while now. But the military, what the military has done is to change tactics, to go on the offensive. Before now, what we've always had was the military staying back and trying to repel attacks. But for some time now, we've seen the military launch offensive operations, but not the same. I mean, Boko Haram is still a potent force. They still carry out attacks, and it would be a mistake to assume that they are defeated. And that's the reason why, for instance, the Nigerian government has been trying to bring in more weapons, bring in more ammunition to further equip the military to continue the operation. It's something that is difficult to say when this is going to end, but no doubt Boko Haram is still a potent force, and it will be a mistake to assume that it's been defeated.
Well, if al-Baghdadi is someone to go by, of course, the end is far from near. He is now, according to this video, urging groups like Boko Haram to intensify their attacks. Just how much of an influence does ISIL have in these types of terror operations within the region? Of course, Mali, Burkina Faso have seen some recent ISIL-affiliated attacks very recently.
I think if there was any doubt as to the influence of ISIS in the region, especially in Burkina Faso and Mali, then anyone who listened to the video of al-Baghdadi, that alleged video now, would be convinced that there's no question at all that ISIS would appear to be gaining some kind of foothold in the region. I mean, al-Baghdadi referenced Mali and Burkina Faso in that video, saying that some groups in Mali and Burkina Faso had actually pledged allegiance to him. And that has always been known. What is happening in Burkina Faso especially is quite pathetic. And part of the reason is you just need to look at the pattern of attacks, the areas where most of these attacks are happening. They're actually happening in the north of the country, where you have the North Province, the Sahel Province, and the East Province. Now, that is an area that is less governed. And now, when you have an area where government presence is either very low or absent completely, it creates room now for militants, this militants now to come in and want to take charge. That's exactly what we saw with Boko Haram in the northeast of the country. Remember when Boko Haram started in 2009 and they scaled up the offensive in 2011, started taking territories. Most of the territories they took were actually either not governed or less governed. I mean, there was no security presence, no government presence, so it was easy for them to go in, establish their own order, so to speak, and that's exactly what we're seeing in Burkina Faso. And you look at the northern region, shares a border with Niger and Mali, so you have a situation where, for instance, in Mali and Niger, the militants have actually been active there for a long time. Now they are coming into Burkina Faso, carrying out attacks. There are some places in the north of Burkina Faso where schools have been shut for a very long time now. It's estimated that about 150,000 children are out of school. And the reason is not far-fetched. Teachers are killed almost every time. The reason, of course, is that, you know, some of these militant groups actually abhor Western education, so they're doing everything to stop education in that axis, and they're trying to create their own order. So until we begin to see a situation where the government of Burkina Faso, and the good thing is that it has realized this, it must establish its presence. There must be some kind of government presence in some of these areas to be able to stop these militant groups. And of course, you would expect that the G5 Sahel force would actually sit up. Funding is a challenge, and it's something that everyone needs to commit to. The AU, the European Union, everybody needs to do something, because if something is not done very quickly, these guys will continue to expand their territory. They get more ambitious, and before you know it, they are targeting the capitals of the state. We've seen it in Mali, we've seen it in Burkina Faso, we've seen it even here in Nigeria. So it's a very big issue that something needs to be done urgently to address.
Well, thank you so much, Deji Badmus, joining us there from Lagos, of course, on that issue, following that video released by ISIL leader Baghdadi. Now, let's move to Sudan for a while. Sudan's army rulers and protest leaders have offered differing visions for a joint council. The military spokesman, however, says he hoped a final structure for the body could be agreed upon soon. Now, the talks came after the two sides agreed to form a joint civilian-military body to rule the Northeast African country. Thousands of protesters remain encamped outside the army headquarters almost 3 weeks after the military and security forces removed former President Omar al-Bashir from power. Meanwhile, followers of the mystical Islamic Sufi tradition also joined the sit-in outside the Defense Ministry complex in Khartoum. Now, Sudan is stating that oil exports have not been disrupted by the ongoing protests in the country. This comes after South Sudan's government said that the oil industry is being negatively affected after workers in the city of Port Sudan went on strike and joined widespread anti-government protests. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports from Port Sudan.
Sudan and South Sudan both depend on oil revenues to fund large parts of their budgets. South Sudan is a landlocked country. It uses Port Sudan in Sudan to take its oil to international market, and the revenue is shared between the two countries.
The government of Sudan is committed to building a stronger relationship with the government and people of South Sudan. A good relationship between us is beneficial to all our people in the two countries, and we believe the relationship will continue growing.
Experts warn that ongoing instability in Khartoum would negatively affect oil business for both Sudan and South Sudan. South Sudan's government says its oil production is currently 175,000 barrels per day, and it's aiming at increasing production to about 360,000 barrels a day by the end of the year. More than 98% of the country's budget is financed by money from the sale of oil. 4 months of protests in Sudan toppled former President Omar al-Bashir, and for several days now, essential chemicals needed for the extraction of oil in South Sudan have not been reaching the country.
We are brothers and sisters. We are actually one community in two countries. This oil belongs to all of us, belongs to the people of Sudan and South Sudan, and we must make sure that it is not interrupted, because this is the lifeline of our people.
South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has offered to mediate between the various conflicting groups in Khartoum to ensure a quick and smooth transition. For now, as protests continue in Sudan, Juba remains concerned about how it can make sure the flow of oil isn't disrupted. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Port Sudan.
Let's turn to Libya now, where heavy fighting continues outside the capital Tripoli between Khalifa Haftar's forces and militias allied with the UN-backed government of national accord. The two rival forces are competing for control of Tripoli. Both sides have gained and lost territory since Haftar launched his offensive early this month. The United Nations has expressed concern over reports of indiscriminate shelling in populated areas. Many civilians have been unable to move to safer areas. Efforts to evacuate them or deliver aid have also been impossible. The UN put the current death toll at more than 270 people, including 21 civilians. Meanwhile, the death toll from flooding caused by Cyclone Kenneth in Mozambique has now risen to 38. This as the World Food Programme struggles to deliver food to hundreds of displaced people. The UN organization, together with other humanitarian agencies, says over 700,000 people remain at risk. Here's CGTN's Daniel Arabmoy with the details.
Days after Cyclone Kenneth made a landfall, Cabo Delgado and the entire northern region of Mozambique continue receiving heavy downpour. And with this comes floods that have taken down a huge part of infrastructure and homes. The World Food Programme is raising concerns as more people continue being trapped and need to be evacuated.
We are very concerned because the water levels keep rising. It keeps raining since yesterday, and a lot of people have been displaced from their homes because we have more than 3,000 houses that have been destroyed.
WFP has already delivered food aid to around 200,000 displaced people in Pemba City. But more food and non-food items are needed as the government is currently overwhelmed.
So according to the government, we have 700,000 people who are at risk after the cyclone, and 200,000 people who are at very high risk. So we are gearing up our emergency operation to make sure that we can bring the food and the aid that people need.
United Nations has released up to $13 million as emergency funding to Mozambique and Comoros Islands. The money will go into repairing damaged infrastructure and provision of food and clean water to their respective citizens. The government of Mozambique is already dealing with the effects of Cyclone Kenneth, which killed over 600 people and displaced over 100,000 others. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Meanwhile, survivors of Cyclone Kenneth have been speaking about their experiences. One man explained how the heavy rain caused flooding and forced his wife and baby out of their home in Pemba. The water was waist deep in some neighborhoods. One man jumped over the flowing floodwater, while others waded through the deluge.
In that moment, the wind was very strong and many trees started falling down before it started raining. The wind destroyed everything, and even where I'm working, there are so many trees that fell down because of the cyclone.
Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The Ethiopian Airlines crash victims' families file a lawsuit against Boeing. And Emperor Akihito becomes the first Japanese monarch to abdicate in 200 years.
Economic data out of the country.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Families of Canadians killed in the Ethiopian Airlines crash in March have filed a lawsuit against Boeing in Chicago. Attorneys contend that Boeing rushed the Air Max 8 to production prematurely in order to compete with rival Airbus and sidestepped safety guidelines in order to reduce costs. Boeing's first-selling 737 MAX was grounded worldwide in March following the fatal Ethiopian Airlines crash that killed all 157 people on board. Boeing says it is making steady progress to certify its grounded 737 MAX jets with a software update and completed a final flight test prior to the certification.
Those 6 minutes will forever be embedded in my mind. I was not there to help them. I couldn't save them. It was up to Boeing and the others in charge to save them. We paid for a safe flight, but instead my family and others in that plane have suffered a profound loss that can never be mended. We are here to ensure that planes remain flyable and safe for human beings, that no lives are lost, again because of the negligence of plane manufacturers and aviation regulators, that no one leaves this earth in such a tragic and painful manner.
A video has emerged of a man believed to be the missing South African journalist Shiraz Mohammed. It has been sent to humanitarian organization Gift of the Givers. Mohammed can be seen pleading for help. He was abducted in January 2017 in Darkush, Syria. He was on his way to the Turkish border when he was taken at gunpoint. Here's more from CGTN's Yuli Sanjamela.
The year 2019 marks exactly 2 years since photojournalist Shiraz Mohammed was captured in Syria. At the time, he was on his way back to the Turkish border after accompanying the aid organization, the Gift of the Givers.
The irony is now, when the ceasefire sort of came to place, we said this is a good time to go, it's safer. And the route that we use is the safest route because our ambulances travel on that route every single day from our hospital to the Turkish border.
The two drivers who had accompanied Mohammed were at the time captured with him, but were released immediately. They were then told that Mohammed had been held for questioning. He's believed to have been held in captive since then and has never been seen until this video that he apparently sent to the gift of the givers surfaced.
My name is Shiraz Mohammed, a South African photographer. Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, my South African president, my family, my friends, the international community, anyone that can help. I need your help in securing my freedom, please. I live in fear of my life. I am scared. We are being bombed. The area that I am in is being bombed by the Russian Air Force. The bombs are getting closer and closer and closer. I need your help. Please help me.
The gift of the giver says there has been some proofs of life before this video. According to the gift of the givers, the first proof of life was received on the 8th of January 2018. It was in a form of 10 very personal questions that were sent to Shiraz Mohammed, and only him could answer those questions. Apparently, he answered them quite well, and the family was happy that it was indeed Shiraz who answered those questions. The aid organization says it's a relief to finally receive conclusive proof that Mohammed is alive.
This is the first proof of life that we received after the answers that he been answered last time in 2018. Since then, since he's kidnapped, we didn't receive anything until now. This is the first video for him. We are so happy that we see him sound and alive. And we're trying our best to have him here in South Africa as soon as possible.
Mohammed's family is reportedly quite happy about the latest developments.
They were so emotional. You know, it's normal that it's first time they see their brother for more than 2 years. So emotional, so many cries, and they keep appealing everyone that to help them to have their brother soon in South Africa.
The Department of International Relations and Cooperation has not responded to our queries about this matter. You listen, Jamila, for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, to news now from here in Kenya. A unique partnership between the East African nation and Chinese medical companies has given thousands of Kenyans access to quality and affordable medical treatment. Prior to the arrival of these special medical machines, most Kenyans would seek advanced medical treatment abroad. Here's more on that story.
The Thika Level 5 hospital is situated around 50 kilometers outside the capital, Nairobi. It is a busy facility owing to its location along the busy highway that links Nairobi to the Mount Kenya region. For doctors and medical staff operating here, the arrival of Chinese medical equipment has changed the way they deal with medical cases.
It is one of the best modalities we have in diagnosis. One, the image acquisition time is short, so the turnaround time for patients management is short. So that makes it one of the best modalities, especially when you are in emergency situations. You are coming from an accident scene, you go through an MRI, you go through the CT scan, we are able to make a diagnosis and the surgeons are able to go to theater within the shortest time possible. So because our location, we have very many highways around us, so we get a lot of accidents around. And the CT scan has helped us to make quick diagnosis that also make the surgeons in the theaters operate very fast.
Through a partnership between the Kenyan and Chinese governments, Chinese companies have been supplying and installing machines such as CT scanners and other imaging equipment in hospitals run by the Kenyan national and county governments.
I think the CT scan program is something that is relatively new in our country. So most of the radiographers in most of the counties had never seen and had never operated a CT scan machine. So it was important that as the program is rolled out in the other counties, they must be trained on how to handle the machine, patient safety.
China Newsoft Medical Corporation is one such example. The company installed modern high-end equipment to Kenyan hospitals. It also provided a one-stop integrated solution for image clouding. To ensure sustainability, the company also trained local medical staff in service delivery and clinical application in over 37 counties in Kenya.
For this case, this patient was involved in a road accident, and this machine has helped us acquire these images. On this image, you can see there's a bleed. The black lines there, those are bleed, which can help us. We've diagnosed it with a chronic bleed, such that the patient can be taken, any action that should be taken, like he can be taken to theatre.
This program is aimed at enabling Kenyan medical personnel attend to and manage over 76% of treatable medical cases. Currently, some Kenyans opt to seek treatment in foreign nations, which is a top-dollar undertaking. Universal healthcare is one of the 4 pillars of the Kenyan government's goals. China has become a medical partner with Kenya for decades, and this is one of the partnerships that makes ties between the two nations not just strong, but also healthy. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
In international news, President Xi Jinping has called on China's young people to continue working towards national rejuvenation. He made the remarks in a speech which marked the centenary of the May 4th movement at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. CGTN's Ho Na reports.
With vision and hope, President Xi has told the over 3,000 people in his audience his interpretations of the May 4th movement in the new era. He said Chinese youth of the new era should bear responsibilities of the times.
新时代，中国青年
Young people today should shoulder the responsibility of the times. They should face obstacles fearlessly, forge ahead in waves, and open up a new era by clearing a path through the forest and make achievements by overcoming difficulties.
Xi admitted there will definitely be daunting challenges, difficulties, and obstacles in the new journey toward the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. But he said the May 4th movement spirit of perseverance is especially needed during the process, and the Chinese youth should always maintain their fine tradition of forging ahead.
全社会都要充分信任青年。
The whole society should fully trust the young people. We should sincerely care for them and be strict with them. We're going to pay attention to their wishes, support them in starting their own businesses, and help them develop.
Xi called on the Communist Party of China to address young people's professional and personal concerns so as to create favorable conditions for their development.
President Xi Jinping has set the tone for his interpretations of May 4th movement spirit in this new era. He asked all aspects of society to care for and serve the youth, as well as create a sound environment for them to develop, innovate, and do pioneering work. Hona, CGTN, Beijing.
Outgoing Japanese Emperor Akihito on Tuesday performed the main ritual to hand over the chrysanthemum throne to his son Naruhito in Japan's first abdication in more than 2 centuries. Akihito, in his final remarks, thanked the people for their support and expressed hope for a peaceful future. During his time on the throne, the emperor sought to ease the painful memories of World War II and reach out to ordinary people, including those marginalized in society. Akihito technically remains emperor until the stroke of midnight, when the country ushers in the new imperial era of Reiwa, or beautiful harmony, that will last as long as Naruhito reigns. Well, the Japanese Emperor Akihito was born in December 1933. He's now 85 years old. He succeeded to the chrysanthemum throne on January 7th, 1989, and became the 125th member of the world's oldest reigning dynasty. Merely 3 months after the demise of his father, Akihito expressed statements of apology to Asian nations which suffered because of Japan. In the past 3 decades, he's acted as a non-official international ambassador for Japan, promoting peace and deepening the country's relations with others. Let's take a look at his efforts.
Heisei,
The name of the era under Akihito translates into achieving peace. He has spent much time to build, mend, and nurture Japan's international relationships and placed an emphasis on the country's peaceful orientation. In 1992, he visited China and expressed sadness over the horrors of World War II. It was the first and only visit by a Japanese emperor to China. The visit helped to set the stage for a positive relationship between the two countries over the following years. Akihito and his wife also made goodwill visits to Canada and the United States in 2009. While in the U.S., they paid respects at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Hawaii. In the coming years, they toured India, Palau, the Philippines, and Vietnam as a way to celebrate friendly relations and peace. More recently, Akihito met with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo last year. Premier Li said that new progress and lasting stable development should be sought in the relationship between the two countries. Marking the 40th anniversary of the China-Japan Treaty of Peace and Friendship, Li said this was the best way to commemorate the signing of the treaty. In his last appearance as the reigning monarch at an annual ceremony marking Japan's World War II surrender, Akihito expressed deep remorse over the conflict. Now, the 85-year-old is stepping down, the first abdication of a sitting Japanese emperor in 2 centuries.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's coming up in your business news. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation to export natural gas to Europe as European refinery closures favor Nigeria. And Tunisia launches an initiative aimed at diversifying exports.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, European aerospace giant Airbus has announced its net profit fell sharply to $44.8 million in the first quarter. The firm attributes the slump to adjustments and the prolonged suspension of defense export licenses to Saudi Arabia. This has resulted in a $212.6 million loss and the ending of the A380 program, costing the company $68.2 million. In February, Airbus announced plans to stop the building of the A380 Super Jumbo, which failed to win over enough airlines to justify its massive costs. The program's future had been in doubt for years as production slowed, and the company acknowledged that the A380 would be scrapped if no new orders came in. Nigeria's National Petroleum Corporation intends to export natural gas to European countries through the proposed Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline. This is aimed at linking the pipeline to the existing Maghreb-Europe gas pipeline in northern Morocco to supply gas from Nigeria to Europe. The group managing director says the closure of refineries in some EU countries would favor Nigeria in the long run. This is due to the movement of refining operations to countries with high demand for petroleum products. He also added that the International Maritime Organization regulation reduces the cap on the sulfur content of bunker fuel from 3.5% to 0.5% as of 2020. Now, Samsung Electronics, the world's biggest smartphone and memory chip maker, reported a slump in their first quarter net profits. Samsung is blaming a drop in demand for its key products and rising competition. Net profits in the January-March period stood at $4.3 billion. That's down 56.9% year-on-year. The numbers are the lowest since the third quarter of 2016. Operating profit also plunged 60.2%, while sales fell 13.5%. The firm, a flagship subsidiary of the giant Samsung Group, is by far the biggest family-controlled conglomerate that dominates business in the world's 11th largest economy and is crucial to South Korea's economic health. According to Tunisia's Minister of Trade, the country's exports to Africa are low. Exports do not exceed 3%, despite the importance of the market, which has about 1 billion consumers. The North African state has launched a new export project. This aims to diversify exported goods and reinforce Tunisia's presence in sub-Saharan Africa.
3 export consortia composed of 37 Tunisian companies were launched to export Tunisian products to African markets, including sub-Saharan African countries.
The first phase of this project concerns 3 sectors identified as promising and priority sectors: agri-food, health and construction. The 5 target markets are Côte d'Ivoire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Cameroon, Kenya and Nigeria.
The first consortium, Taste Tunisia, specialized in the food industry, includes 11 companies. The second group, specialized in construction, Tunisia Building Partners, and the third consortium, operating in the health sector, includes 16 companies.
The establishment of this consortia, financed by the German Agency for International Cooperation in Tunisia, is part of the project of promotion of job-creating export activities to new African markets.
Professionals assert that the project aims to support the potential of these sectoral groups and to develop the offers of public and private companies to promote exports to sub-Saharan Africa.
The creation of consortia will strengthen the capacity of Tunisian companies called upon to submit attractive bids in order to take advantage of the opportunities offered to export and sell Tunisian products in an efficient manner in several African countries.
Tunisian authorities and their foreign partners work to support small and medium-sized enterprises to market Tunisian products abroad. The objective is to create wealth and offer workforce in order to boost the national economy.
Tunisian Minister of Trade stressed his department's commitment to providing all the means to ensure the success of the 3 export consortia in Africa, especially after Tunisia's accession to the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, which is the largest regional bloc with 21 member countries. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's go to Zimbabwe now, where several businesses are promoting environmentally conscious living. Among them is Waste Not Want Not, a company that provides alternative products to help citizens live waste-free. Zimbabwe has made efforts to put forward environmentally friendly policies, such as banning the use of expanded polystyrene containers, a styrofoam-like material. The government has also urged businesses and citizens to use more recyclable and biodegradable materials.
Recycling has had its purpose, it's had its place, it's not bad, but it's not the answer, and it's not fixing things. It's giving the people the excuse to keep buying these things that they may not need. So we wanted people's mindset to be changed and say, okay, let's rethink what we're buying. What are we buying it in? So let's start rethinking how we can do better and doing our part in protecting the environment.
The second Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation concluded with broad consensus and fruitful outcomes. The event was themed Belt and Road Cooperation, Shaping a Brighter Shared Future, and it included the setup of a global partnership that was intended to advance development and business cooperation. It also set the tone for the building of an inclusive world economy and provides a driving force for China's reforms. Now, those in attendance included 38 heads of state and government, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. Over 6,000 guests from 150 countries and 92 international organizations also attended the forum. Uber Technologies, the world's largest ride-hailing company, is planning an initial public offering. The IPO values the company between $80.5 billion and $91.5 billion, which is 1/3 below what the startup's insiders had hoped for. The valuation outlined in a regulatory filing on Friday is less than the $120 billion that investment bankers told Uber last year it could fetch. The figure is, however, closer to the $76 billion valuation it attained in a private fundraising round in 2018.
Well, I think it's exciting for the markets, but as an investor, you got to be very cautious. I mean, we just saw Lyft go their IPO, had a great day, and then all of a sudden it's down 36% from its high. So anytime you see these really hyped up IPOs as an investor, you got to be very careful because, you know, a lot of them don't turn out, at least in the first couple weeks, first months, maybe in the first 6 months, they don't turn out to be as profitable as you would hoping they would be. So last year they lost $1.9 billion in the whole year, and we just lost in the first quarter $1 billion. So to get profitable, it's going to be really tough. But their vision is kind of nice, right? They're trying to show that they can be all kinds of transportation. They have Uber Freight, they have Uber Eats, they have the hail riding. They're also looking into autonomous cars. Autonomous cars. They also have 90 million people hooked up to their credit system, right? They're people that can charge their cards. So they have all the aspects to make money.
Well, that is where we leave your business news, but here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, Christian Dior lights up Marrakesh with a fashion show and floating candles.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start in Morocco now, where French fashion label Christian Dior has held an outdoor fashion show where Pan-African wax fabrics took center stage. Burkinab designer Pathé Ouedraogo, who's known for dressing Nelson Mandela, and an Ivorian fabric manufacturer were invited to collaborate on this latest collection. CGTN's Laura Walubengo finds out more.
Christian Dior's latest cruise collection is dedicated to African wax fabrics. Crossing cultures and continents, a collection previewed on African soil at the 16th century El Badi Palace in Marrakesh. Unusual for the fashion house, it commissioned an Abidjan-based firm to manufacture the elaborate prints.
Anne Grosfillet, je suis anthropologue. Maria Grazia wanted to work with the wax, but in a different way. The fabric is interesting because cloth is the voice of women, which is used as nonverbal communication. It is also very unifying, because it is only fabric that ultimately has a Pan-African dimension and brings together all the cultures of Africa. North, South, East and West. Et c'est aussi un tissu qui est très fédérateur.
Fashion houses like Dior are increasingly traveling to far-flung locations to showcase their cruise collections.
I think it's very important to be in Marrakesh because Moroccan is a place that is in between Europe and Africa. And I think it's a really inspiring place. It's in our tradition to go around the world and to promote our brand. And in this collection, I decided to make many collaborations with different artists and with different associations that speak about this idea of craftsmanship.
The Marrakesh show also paid homage to the late Yves Saint Laurent. He was Dior's creative director in the late 1950s. A designer found inspiration from North Africa throughout his career. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Staying in Morocco, as fashion changes in the age of globalization, the intricate, laborious works of art and design are gradually fading, with many opting for a quick pick off the rack. But one brocade master weaver is holding on to this fading, intricate art form.
Abdelkader Awazani is the last of Morocco's brocade master weavers and has been repeating the same gestures for 63 years in his dilapidated workshop in the heart of the old city of Fes.
I was a child when I learnt this profession. There were several people who did this and they taught me. They're all dead now. The people who come here to learn the craft don't stay for more than 2 to 3 months. Sometimes they last 1 to 2 years before finding this craft too complicated and then deciding to leave. That's the main problem.
The last witness of a bygone era, Abdelkader intricately creates shimmering silk fabrics enhanced with gold or silver thread for bridal jewelry and high-end furnishings.
We use several designs for our fabrics. We have several models, and everything is calculated here. It's mathematical. Those who say the opposite of that don't know anything about this craft.
His rare fabrics cost up to $560 depending on the complexity of the patterns.
The work I did with the Americans is very well known in France and was displayed at Colette Boutique in Paris. It was in this very big store.
Though the rules of the art he guards like a family secret, it is said that the ancestral know-how had its roots in the era of the Marinid sultans of the 13th century, a history that has been greatly threatened by the blow that came with industrial-scale competitors.
Nobody wants to learn this craft. There's no future in it, so nobody gives it any importance. That's all.
So with every shimmering stitch, Abdelkader holds on to an artistic history that is threatened to fade into the world of fairy tales with every passing day. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now, as bombs fall on the Libyan capital, businessman Mustafa Iskandar has opened an art gallery and cultural center in a rare effort to revive the capital's old city, haunted by neglect and destruction.
As a new war reached the Libyan capital, businessman Mustafa Iskandar opened an art gallery and culture center, hoping to draw attention to a long-neglected old city in need of revival.
Libya lacks a museum for fine arts. I'm fond of collecting art pieces and antiques, so I decided to turn this house into a permanent gallery for art pieces.
With no funding, Iskandar bought a derelict house close to the landmark Roman Mark Aurelius Arch, investing $720,000 to refurbish it as a gathering point for artists.
I didn't receive any funding from any government entity or non-profit organization. This was all done from my personal efforts. And hopefully, I can be successful in bringing this idea to life and bringing together artists, intellectuals, and those in our society who are interested in the arts.
Under the lead of former ruler Muammar Gaddafi, authorities restored a handful of old buildings and were planning a larger rehabilitation project when the 2011 uprising broke out, stopping the work. Little has happened since. In the old city, a group of young people also organize walks to explore sites and build ties with the remaining inhabitants. Relying on their own funds and donations, they repainted a run-down wall in white, a small start for what they hope will be a rehabilitation in the future.
The campaign started in December 2018 and more people have joined since then. We introduced them to the old city, the dangers that the old city faces, the historical buildings and the neglected ones. We tell them everything they need to know about the old city.
Tripoli's old city has been run down for years. It was home to one of the best preserved museums in North Africa, with monuments going back to the Romans. Most Libyans who can afford it have long moved out of the old city to more modern districts. Hopefully, with these renewed efforts, the old city could regain its historic value. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And here's what's coming up in your sports news up next. Senegal hosts the second edition of the Sandura Yamaha motocross race.
Africa, where champions are made